They wanted somebody from the jury to speak very briefly on the day's deliberation. It has been a long day, and I don't want to hold you up any longer. But let me just make some of the points which stand out, and we can make up our mind, and so can you, at the end of the whole deliberation after 4 days. I think the first thing which comes from the evolution or the history of the World Bank since the Second World War, end of the Second World War, is it is an organization which has increasingly not only been controlled by the US, but has turned into, have given up increasingly the pretense, particularly from the time of McNamara, and has become largely a commercial organization. As somebody saying, the World Bank is after all a bank, and that is the bottom line. The second thing, which is more dramatic, is that not only we all know, and it was said that the presidents of the World Banks are chosen by the United States, more exactly the State Department, but there is something more striking. At least 2 of the presidents of the World Bank have mass murder blood on their hand. The first one was McNamara, and the second one was Wolfowitz. The first for Vietnam, and the second for Iraq, which is still going on. And McNamara, whom in some conference I had seen and met, said that he is atoning, but he is atoning at the cost of the poor in our countries. Now, the second point which strikes out, and which I wanted to bring to your attention, is the World Bank is very largely guided by what one of the speakers said, marketization. Now, marketization has 2 aspects to it, to put it very precisely. First aspect is, as again was said, that the rich have more purchasing power, therefore they have more vote in the market than the poor. And unlike many other third world countries, this is a especially important thing because it's a sort of functioning democracy. So the poor have one person, one adult, one vote, but at the same time the rich have many more votes than the poor. So when you go towards marketization, you actually tend to distort the political system by its very nature. It's absolutely structural. Because, unless the state plays the role of, to some extent, of the poor, you'll be distorting this because you are really going from there. You are giving more voting power to the rich, and this is what marketization does. And this is what is happening in education, this is what is happening in health. This is a common recurring theme all along. The second aspect of marketization, which was less emphasized, is, or if you like, it is the dual, it is the other side of marketization, is that the state has to be correspondingly weaker. Because you cannot have the market as an institution becoming stronger without making the state as an institution weaker. And the 2 actually, in that sense, form one common program. And this is the crux of what has come to be called the neoliberal ideology, that marketization and weakening of the state, with very many different particular aspects like privatization, private property, and so on. Now, there is one particular point which didn't come up, and I'm sure it will come up on the 3rd and the 4th day extensively. That is, all common property in India, there is a systematic attempt in the name of marketization and importance of the market to turn all forms of common property into private property. This is true of traditional land held by the tribal people. This is true of, and it hits most, and I could give you many examples. If you travel in India, you will see it yourself. Most of these are the poorest people in the country. So, it is not a metaphor that the marginalized become more marginalized, they don't have more purchasing power. There is a more direct mechanism which is working, and that is you take away even the little bit of common property like forest land, so on and so forth from them. Now, there is another very important thing which came up is about the political aspect, which is about the sovereignty. Sovereignty is a slogan which everybody uses. Everybody says they are a patriot from Manmohan Singh onwards. But basically, if you look at if marketization weakens the state in one way, the entire process of globalization weakens the nation state in many other ways. And examples were given. For example, your ability to make commercial laws becomes much weaker because of WTO regulations. Your ability to deal with borders and so on becomes much less, much more porous because of capital flows and so on. I cannot go into all this. But the whole notion of sovereignty, if you break it down into item by item, you see that in two ways this is being weakened. And I think it came out in many discussions. I'm just trying to give you the general thing, that on one hand, you have a weakening of the nation state through various things. On the other hand, globalization basically means you have another round of weakening of the nation state from the other side. Now, it is in this context, I think, one of the most important things, which is, again, like the common property, which is very directly the World Bank's way of doing things, it is what came under the name of revolving door. And what did not come, the other part of it, the reward system. That is a reward which the World Bank offers, and consequently the revolving door mechanism which works. Now, basically, there were enough concrete examples which are given, but if you look through all these examples and so on, there is one fact which stands out, and that is, it is, a reward system which is extremely biased against the poor in a particular way. That the people who get, at individual level, it is bureaucrats, it's politicians, it's, this, that, and the other researchers and so on, who get attracted by the World Bank money. I mean, I personally know far too many examples to doubt it. But one of the problems of this is the consequences of their reward. I mean, it is not a question of dishonesty. It is not a question of corruption. It is not a question of academic independence. There is something much more fundamental. And this is what actually has made me into increasingly more inclined to social activism. Because basically what you see is that in the process, the consequences are borne by the poorest in the country. And that is why it is criminal. If the revolving door system is a criminal system, the reward system of the World Bank is not because only it creates a body of so-called knowledge, which glorifies the market and so on and so forth. But it's something much more pernicious, because those who benefit from this are quite different from those who pay for it. And those who pay for it are usually the poorest. When you marketize, you and I don't pay for it. Nobody sitting in this room, or 99% of the people sitting in this room, do not pay for it. The people who pay for marketization are a completely different group of people, and they are the poorest, the weakest, and the only thing which they can do is to show their anger. Now, this came out in very many particular examples, in water, in education. We don't have time to go through all this. I'm not going to go through any of these examples.